Welcome back to Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. And I have to give a shout out to my guest, Susanne Madsen, today. We've been trying to get together for literally all of Q4, and we're finally doing it. So, Susanne, thank you for your flexibility and your patience. And it's just so lovely to see you again.
It is absolutely good to see you too. And thank you for having me. Yeah.
Well, I want to start the show. We're going to put your bio below. And we decided in season 4 that we like our guests to kind of highlight who they are. So tell our listeners a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Yeah. I'm based in the UK. I'm actually originally from Denmark, but I've been in the UK for 25 years. And throughout that time, my focus has really been leading big projects. And then I transitioned into coaching. So I had my own scars from leading those projects in different sectors, mostly finance, actually. And I took my coaching qualification back in, oh my God, it's 2008. It's a long time ago, because I was invited on a leadership program. And in that leadership program, I was personally coached for the first time. And I had that amazing aha moment just from somebody asking me questions. And it's as if I'm not actually kidding when I say that. It's as if something flicked inside my brain. I realized that I had the power somehow to make the changes I wanted. And it sounds so simple when I say it, but oftentimes we walk around not knowing that it's our level of thinking that's holding us back. So that was so powerful that I actually decided to study coaching after that leadership program. And then initially I began to coach my colleagues. I was still running these projects. And I thought, this is 12 years ago now, I thought, I've got to make this my full-time profession. And so my natural background was in running projects. And I began to coach a lot of change managers, a lot of project managers. And I wrote this is not the first book, but it is my second book. I've now written a third book, but this is the book that it's been a book that has carried me because this is part of the core of what I do. And today I run a lot of leadership programs for project managers, and these are managers of big, complex projects. And I would say that classic leadership programs where we do module 1, 2, 3, module 1 looking inwards, module 2 is about leading teams, and module 3 we do a complete simulation. We work with actors. And we do all the classic things. We give them one-on-one coaching. We do personality profiles. So today, I really do this leadership work, mostly focused on people in change and running projects.
I love that. And you just reminded me when we first met, and I think we've had a few mutual colleagues on LinkedIn who connected us together. And I remember we had the same date in common, because it was 2008 for me as well. You came out of finance and I came out of the medical world. And it was just somebody at the time, it was my coach asking the same good questions to ponder and then saying, what about all those transferable skills that you have? You have been coaching. So you just ignited that memory of our conversation for me. And it's always fun to see how people land in the coaching and leadership development space. So I'm going to dig in, and I wanted to talk about your book, How to Do the Inner Work, because with my Heart-Centered Leadership Playbook, we connected and there's so much alignment there. So my first question is, your book, How to Do the Inner Work, and we'll have both your books below in the episode description. I love how it explores freeing ourselves from a lifetime of conditioning. How do you see the inner work transforming project leaders? And what first step would you recommend to those struggling to connect with their authentic leadership style?
Yeah, and I'll just hold it up here, actually, How to Do the Inner Work. So the people I mostly coach, they come and they present with a number of topics, a number of issues, something that's holding them back. And of course, they're all different, but I see some common themes. And one of them, I would say, is lack of confidence. And when I say confidence, I don't mean a superficial confidence. I mean more like lack of self-esteem, feeling I'm not I'm not good enough, or I doubt myself, or I feel nervous in certain situations. I feel nervous around certain types of people. I'm not sure, so I hold myself back. And that, of course, is preventing somebody from truly leading and truly leading with their own brilliance and their own heart. And so in that context, doing the inner work is actually about finding out, where does this come from? What is that voice in me saying when I am in these situations where I hold myself back? Is it true? Is it true that I can't do this? Is it true that I can't do that? Is it true that I'm too old? Is it true that I'm too young? Is it true that I don't have enough experience? Is it true that that person doesn't like me? Is it true that they're out to get me? Whatever, people have these narratives. And the result is the same. The result is that I become self-conscious. I'm not leading with my authenticity because I constantly doubt myself. And we think that this is only junior leaders and managers who have this. It's not. It is people in very high position. I'm sure you've come across this as well.
Absolutely. And, just the inventory of the narratives you suggested, age doesn't matter. It's a narrative that I've seen and I talk about as well. And it's a combination of your upbringing, your life experience, your work experience, your academic experience. It's all thrown into the same mix. And it's funny how that value and belief system can be so lowered. And sometimes it only takes one person and one experience to really anchor somebody in that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I distinguish between situational lack of confidence and something that's more like a deeper rooted, more permanent lack of confidence, because the latter takes a lot more work. The other one, you can kind of, it's easier to overcome a situation where I feel I'm not good enough. But I'll give you an example. I coached a gentleman who was a director, quite high up director. He was not a project manager. He was leading a whole bidding team. And he was going to an event with many other directors for several days. And he became very self-conscious because he felt, oh my God, how am I going to measure up? I said, well, you're a director. Yes, but they are bigger directors. They have much more confidence. They have much more experience than me. And to your question about what some of the exercises or the first step I recommend somebody do. So what I had him do was, we listed all of his strengths. He listed his strengths. I didn't do it. And that came from a rational point of view. What are my strengths? Okay, he could do it. But then the next step was to feel those strengths, not with your intellect, but with your heart. Mm-hmm. So really take ownership for those strengths. And I tell people, you'll know that you've taken ownership when you feel like some kind of warmth, some kind of tingling in the middle of your chest. And this is not easy because we are used to thinking. We're not necessarily used to feeling our strengths.
Yes.
And then I had him imagine that he was standing on a mountain full of his strengths and experiences and everything that, had made him up until that point in time. And I said to him, can you feel your mountain below your feet? So it becomes really a visceral experience. And I reminded him that you cannot see your own mountain because you're standing on it. You can very clearly see how big other people's mountains are. Mm-hmm. And that's an exercise I like to guide people through. And it's one of the first ones in the book.
I love it. I love the mention of feeling it viscerally and that head and heart alignment. It's the shortest distance and the longest journey for so many people. So I love the metaphors you use there. Okay, second question, has permanent residency on the show. I've asked over 300 leaders this question. What imperfections does Susanne bring to her heart-centered leadership?
Oh my God, how long do we have? Well, I would say because I come from a background of project management and I worked in finance, before I went on my leadership journey, before I became more aware and before I went on my coaching journey, I was quite task-oriented. People tell me, you're not as task-oriented as you think you are. But I became aware that I was leading a lot through tasks. And so that's been my journey, is really putting people in focus and being much more present. Obviously, as a coach, I lead with coaching styles, but I still probably have a tendency every now and then to go back to my tasks, and I have that. So I have to remind myself.
Yeah.
And it's hard, when we get busy. It's hard, and I think I connect so well with many of my coachees who have these jobs where they have so much pressure on their shoulders, and I have to remind them also, look up from your desk.
Yes, it's very easy to do and do and do and not put the white space in the calendar to be. And I join you. You're in great company on the podcast. I think regardless of what we do and what sector we're in, whether we're holding a position or we're an entrepreneur, it's the gentle reminder that leads you to renew that. And you have the reminders. So that's the good thing. And it is good to look up every once in a while. That's a great strategy.
But
Okay.
I'll give you one more.
Sure.
I'll give you one more because I don't like to show vulnerability. And I teach people that have to show vulnerability, right? And the science shows that if we want to build trust, if we want to be truly heart-based leaders, we have to be able to admit our mistakes, and we have to not pretend that we're perfect, because we're not. And I'll tell you, in this book, I'm leading with one of my very vulnerable stories. And I did that deliberately because I like it when people show vulnerability. So I'm trying to do the same. It doesn't mean it's easy.
It's not easy, and it's not for the weak of heart. And I love that. Okay, here's my third question. Given your experience coaching leaders in high pressure, project driven environments, we'll use finance as well as global organizations. What role does emotional intelligence play in reducing stress and fostering team motivation? And if you could give us a practical example where emotional intelligence shifted a team's dynamic, that would be so valuable.
Yeah, and you know what? This happens all the time. I see the shift all the time. So emotional intelligence is absolutely crucial. And I know you know this, so I don't have to tell you why. But perhaps some of the listeners need a bit of a reminder. But I see so many people, leaders in all walks of life, who rely a lot on their cognitive intelligence, and we have to. Listen, we have to. I always say, people, don't throw that away, but add the emotional intelligence. And it's something we have to work at. Some people have it naturally. I would say most people who I've come across, it's not that natural. So they have to put in some work. They have to learn to listen, because they're impatient and because they have all this pressure on their shoulders. They have to learn to ask questions. They have to learn to not rush, but to try to listen to what's being said between the lines. And in coaching, we call it global listening at level 3, where you listen with your skin, you listen with your intuition, you listen with all your senses, not just your ears.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I put great pride in helping people with. And in our leadership programs, we go through that. But you're asking about teams as well. You're asking about team dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you a very concrete example. We work with something called a team charter. Now, everybody here, most people these days, whether they're a project manager or not, they run some type of projects, because change happens through projects. And most people will be familiar with something called a project charter. But you write down what you need to achieve, by when, what the budget is. It's kind of where, why, when, what, who, how much. But very few people do a team charter. And a team charter is independent of what we're going to deliver. It's about the team. How are we going to do this? What are our values as a team? How are we going to treat each other? What are our ground rules? How are we going to deal with conflict? How are we going to make decisions? Are we going to let the leader make all the decisions? Are we going to make decisions democratically? What happens when we disagree? These are really, really tough behavioral questions. And emotional intelligence is important, because these are not just questions about deliverables. They're questions about how we want to treat each other, how we want to interact with each other, what our values are. They're really emotionally intelligence-based questions. And so I always encourage people to use a team charter. It can be downloaded for free from my website. That's not the issue. The template is not the issue. It's coming together as a team to discuss, how do we want to do this? Not for the leader or the manager to say, this is how we're going to do it. Let's fill in the template. No, that's misunderstood.
Absolutely. And you can give the template, but it's kind of like words without the deeds. It's without the behavior. I love that. I think any good charter is good, whether it's for a team, for an organization, for a behavioral perspective. It's powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my last leadership question. Leadership often requires balancing personal transformation with delivering measurable results. How can project leaders create space for their own growth while driving success in a fast-paced environment where outcomes are paramount?
Yeah, another good question. So we have to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
We have to deliver. We're not, and the same with teams. We can't be the kind of leader who only listens to people without delivering.
Yeah.
So there's no two ways about it. That's the job. The job is to deliver some value. And let's just be clear. There's value to be delivered. It's not just delivering a task. We're delivering real value to somebody out there.
Yes.
So I think your question is not about the delivery. The question is, how can I, in addition to that, make sure that I grow and that I am true to my own, I guess, my own desires for where I want to go. Is that right? Is that?
Absolutely. And I think we all have our own charter, and maybe sometimes we waver from it. I think it goes back to what you were saying about the example with the director. I think we all need a certain validation and revalidation at times, because when you have to deliver, it comes with pressure. And sometimes we can internalize that. And that's where there's that collision between logic and emotion.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I love that.
Well, I'll give you an example, because
Sure.
One of the guys that I interview for this book, his story is called Peter Ivanov. He has a story about high-performing teams in a virtual context. And what he did to increase his team's performance was that he asked each individual team member what they wanted to gain from the project beyond delivery. And they mapped personal values to project outcomes. Mm. And that's a clear way to make sure that people want to be in the project, because if I, through the project, can grow in a certain area that really matters to me, then I am doubly motivated, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can somehow create this link between personal values and the project's outcomes, it's a win-win-win-win situation. I'm not saying it's always possible, but that's a mindset we have to look at it with.
Absolutely. Intention's everything, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to swing over to my Fab Four. These are just 4 fun questions. We don't want you to think. We just want to know what's sitting on the top of that brilliant mind.
Okay.
Give us one practical tip that you'd give our listeners today for embracing heart-centered leadership into their daily lives.
I would say it has to be noticing your emotions. So there's some great apps out there if you like technology. It can ping you several times a day. How am I feeling? Because if we are not aware of how we're feeling, we cannot begin to even notice other people's emotions and manage them. So for me, that's emotional awareness, top tip.
I've said many times on this podcast, what a world it would be if everyone regulated their emotions.
Yes. And again, just the step before that, you can only regulate if you notice them.
Absolutely. Awareness is everything.
Yep.
Okay, second question. If your leadership style had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh my God, I'm not good with theme songs. What would it be? I have no idea.
If you were thinking of your favorite song, which one would come to mind first?
Well, I like chill out songs, like they don't really have a theme. They're just like in the background, really ambient. But I think my leadership style is a little more upbeat than just ambient. So I don't have a theme song that comes to mind. But because right now, as we're recording this, Christmas is around the corner, and I would not put a Christmas theme on my leadership style. But for sure, it would be something that has a good rhythm to it, and some upbeat elements, and some chill out elements too. That's all I would say.
Fair enough. Okay, what would you summarize as a key takeaway or lesson from our discussion today to leave with our listeners?
Perhaps the emotional intelligence, because that is, and it has been proven that it matters more than cognitive intelligence. Yeah, it's true.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to have you finish the show for me by finishing this sentence. And again, it was lovely to see you. And I thank you again for your patience as life was in the way for Q4, but we made it. And it's always lovely to chat with you, Susanne. All the best for next year. Finish this sentence for me. Heart-centered leadership is
the only true way of leading, and the only way that'll get us real results.